got a great sound to play, you know.
Hello?
Have you ever snogged a lady?
We had a technical problem.
Are we on? Yeah, we're on there.
Can I swear?
Shit!
Welcome to Crunch and Roll. I'm Foxy, done breakfast shows across the UK, more recently did some work for the BBC. Pat Sharp's my guest on this episode, and do I even need to do an intro for this one? Maybe not. All I'll say is we find out how his first ever professional radio gig was daytime on Radio 1 and the real story of the Parky red card incident. Let's crunch and roll. Oh yeah. Pat, how are you?
Very well, sir, very well. Long time no hear, see.
I know, it has been many years. Do you know, my fond memory of meeting you at Free, I got overly excited that you were coming in. And the one thing I'll never forget is you brought your whole range of production with you. Like we just scrapped all the jingles and we used yours. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's all. I always bring it with me. I mean, it's like just keep them in my pocket. If anyone says you got a jingle, I go, yeah, look, have a look in here.
All right, Pat. Well, let's go right back to the start because we'll get on to when we met later on. But where are you from originally?
Originally from London, and I was born, I believe, according to my 93-year-old mum, who's still going strong, in the London Clinic, which sounds very posh and sort of where everybody was obviously born back in the days. I'm 61 now, so yes, I was born very, very posh in the London Clinic. I'm not sure if it's still there or not. There's probably a plaque of some kind, not for me, but just for the building. Then I've stayed in North London from there on in Stanmore in Middlesex, and always been around that area from Stanmore to Edgware to sort of Hertfordshire, so North London.
Do you know what? When we were doing some research, Pat, I could not believe that you're 61 because you look amazing. Can I just say that?
Well, you're very kind, and you look delicious too.
You're a great liar. All right, so where did because am I right in thinking that you had a real passion at a very young age that you wanted to be a DJ?
Oh, 100%, yes. This is my thing. At school, I would, tell everybody, who was going to be on Capital that night, at what time they'd be on and what time they'd be playing a certain jingle. And they would look at me as if to say, like, why do you know this stuff? And what does it mean to anybody? But to me, it meant everything. So I always wanted to be a radio presenter, and I would go and stand outside Capital Radio, being the local station for me, and wait for Kenny Everett to come down the stairs and get his autograph. So, yeah, I was a huge fan and ended up working with Kenny, and he became my friend. So and all the other guys. So I sort of, even yesterday I'm having a chat with Tony Blackburn, who's not very well at the moment, as you probably know. And I was chatting with Tony, while he was in hospital. And I chat with Tony and I chat with Kid Jensen, and I knew all the guys who have passed, who are as legendary as they are. So I kind of came from a really good time where I looked up to all these really well-known DJs who were not only on the radio but also on TV. And I aspired to be like them and ended up becoming contemporaries with them and working with them and becoming their pals. So it's been fantastic. Whereas I think these days, perhaps a young upcoming person who wants to be on the radio perhaps doesn't have those kind of people to look up to because they don't seem to be in the same sort of ilk these days. They're just, a lot of radio presenters I hear just call themselves by their first name on the air. Hey, it's John with you. And I'm going, right, okay, John.
Is it true that because a lot of people, when, for example, the chart was on, they would record and hit pause when the DJ started talking. But what you did,
where you're going with this.
Is it true that you hit pause when the song was on, but you recorded the DJs?
Yes, and I'm not the only person. Check in with Stephanie Hurst and other such people who also did that. I'm not just the only weirdo. And yeah, I wanted to tape the DJs and what they did and the jingles. And I've got the most fantastic thing I could send you. I've got about 4 hours worth on an MP3 of a 3-week trip to California that I made with friends of mine. We wanted to go skateboarding, so we went there in 1980. And I took with me my cassette radio, and I took with me a bunch of cassettes that obviously had recordings of Capital Radio on them, because I didn't want to go all the way to LA and not be able to hear Capital for 3 weeks. So I thought, well, I better take it with me so I can just put it on, and obviously it'll be fantastic and I won't need any radio out there. Well, as soon as I landed, I went, whoa, and started to tape over everything and then bought 100 more cassettes and went home with this new, unique sound in my ears of these guys bathed in echo on Kiss and stuff. And then the same in New York when I went there. So really, that was my buzzy time, where I took what I loved about London radio and joined the American radio sort of sound that I got there, and started recording things wherever I could to not purloin everything, but certainly get ideas from. Yeah, and I think everybody gets ideas. I've had loads of messages from people saying, I got into radio because of you, and I loved what you did, and I loved the way you did, your radio shows and how you presented them. I had so much more freedom back in the day doing radio than young people going into it today have. So I was very lucky.
So what was the plan at a young age to be a DJ? So how did you, because is it true that you went to Norway? So was your professional career, did that start in Norway?
No, that came afterwards. I started my radio career by sending off demo tapes to radio stations, as indeed no doubt you did, and various other people listening will have done or will be doing, and didn't get any luck. I had no joy, nice letters back saying thanks very much. You see people put these things up on Facebook these days. Here's my letter of being declined at radio somewhere. And I didn't get any luck, and I thought, well, even if I do get any luck, what will I do? I can't afford to go and live in that town for, Town FM. So what will I do? So I was doing mobile discos, and I found a guy who via somebody I knew, I think she was his secretary. He's quite a well-known guy, actually. He certainly has been over the years. He's married to Jane, whose surname I don't remember. She is, or was married, certainly, I don't know, I'm not sure, to Gary Farrow, and he's quite a big name. So he was the big boss at Sony, one of the big guys, was a record plugger when I first met him, and went on his best mates with Elton John and worked with Elton over the years, and indeed was really good pals with George Michael, very responsible for a lot of things in his career. Anyway, Gary was a mere record plugger, and his secretary, who I knew, who was the daughter of somebody who I once met on a bus, put me in touch with him, and he said, I can help you get your demo tape out there and give it to the right people and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, he didn't get any luck with it, so he passed it to a manager. And that manager became my agent, and he took me on. And within 4 or 5 months of this guy being my agent, I covered Steve Wright in the afternoon on Radio 1 with no experience. As you do, as everybody does. Surely everybody does that, don't they?
Pat, you realise that there's nobody that's been on Crunch and Roll that's how it started. I mean, that is, when you say that, does that just, I mean, I know you went on to big things, but does that not sound ridiculous to you?
It does, totally, yeah. And to be honest with you, I remember going into Michael's office. This was my manager, and he said to me, I've got some really good news. Come up to London, he goes, and jump on the train and come up and see me. I've got some good news for you. And I walked in, and he said to me, you are going to be on the Radio 1 afternoon show next week. And I went, oh, that's not really for me. I said, I prefer Capital. I don't really listen to Radio 1. Could you not change it over to the other station? And he went, what? So I went, all right, I'll do it.
Can you remember how you felt when you were covering Steve Wright's show?
Well, you see, I've gone from being blasé about saying, I don't want to be on that station, to being really, really, really nervous, and obviously thinking, hang on, this is really quite a big deal. I may not listen to the station, but at the end of the day, I'm being sandwiched between Dave Lee Travis and Peter Powell, and Simon Bates is on before that, and I think the reason why I got this deputy work that week was because Steve Wright was doing breakfast that week as Mike Reed was on holiday. So it was all the sort of famous guys, the legends, and I was on the air, and DLT was on before me saying, well, coming up at 2:00, Pat Sharp. I would say good luck to him, but might not be him, might be a woman. So there you go. And he sort of led into it, and I hit the button and pressed a button and then spoke and went, hello, it's me. I think I was like 20, and I didn't really have a DJ voice yet, and I still haven't. So it was a time where I basically thought to myself, do you know what? Just give it your best shot. And I think by 3:30, when I reached round to play the news jingle in a studio that they shared with Radio 2 for some of the FM broadcasts, as you know, at the time, I put in a jingle that went, Radio 2 News. And I thought, wow, that's good. I've gone from Radio 1 to Radio 2 in an hour and a half. This is great. I'm really moving up the ladder. Radio 4, here we come.
So did you enjoy that show, that first show?
I did enjoy it, yes. And I don't think I made too many errors, but listening back, and it is available on SoundCloud, but I don't want anyone to check that out, you would be absolutely shocked as to how this person could ever have had a job anywhere, let alone on Radio 1, because I was not great. I thought I was brilliant, but I really wasn't.
Were you confident?
I was confident enough to know that, having done 2 or 3 practice sessions beforehand, that I knew which buttons to press, and I was always fairly confident as an operator that I wouldn't have to go in and worry what I was doing with the equipment. And I was on a desk where, I'm not sure if you know this, but those old BBC desks back in the early 80s, the faders went the other way. So instead of pushing a fader up, as you would do these days and have done for many years, the fader would start at the up point and it would be slightly curved, and you would pull it back towards you to make it go. Well, to make hear some sounds or put your microphone on. So it was all the other way, which is really odd when I think about that now. So it started at the top, and to turn anything on, you had to bring it towards you. So, but I could handle that because that was the only desk I'd ever used. I'd never even been on hospital radio, so might as well start with some faders that go the wrong way at Radio 1. Why not?
So what happens there? So you do a sterling job covering the legend Steve Wright, and then do you get offered weekends?
Can you edit out the word sterling from that? Thank you. I did a job.
Well, I mean, you say you don't want people to go to SoundCloud, but that's the first thing I'm going to do as soon as we finish this. So you know the people.
Thanks.
So what happened next then, Pat?
Basically, it didn't happen like you say. I was told, thanks very much, glad you've had a nice week, and you can shoot home now, and you don't have a job. So I went from being on Radio 1 one week to not being on radio anything the next week, and just went home, and I didn't have a job. I'd been doing mobile discos and been a motorcycle courier and taken my records in the boot of my Cortina to Germany and worked as a DJ in a club, but I didn't have an actual job at that time, I don't think. So I just went back to thinking, well, that was a fun week. This week's not going to be so good. And then I got snapped up by Tony Prince, who got on the phone to my agent and said, we'll have him. Bring him out to Luxembourg. So I went to Radio Luxembourg not the following month. I must have got in November. So I think after doing Steve Wright for a week in September 1982, I thought I'd better have a month off. So I didn't do anything in October. And I went to Luxembourg in November and worked there for 2 weeks. And during that 2-week stint of being in Luxembourg and really sort of crafting my skill by being on every night at something ridiculous o'clock. Who knows what time I was on, but I was on late. I think one night, I just carried on for the hell of it. I think I was meant to stop at 12 or something, and I just kept going because I thought, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? It's not going to turn itself off, is it? I'll just keep going. And I started talking to my mate and just gave him a few mentions and playing some records. I think that's what happened, but don't quote me on that. It won't be on SoundCloud. But I ended up getting offered, while I was there during my 2 weeks, my own show back on Radio 1, where I was to join as one of the 3 new DJs on 3 new shows. First time they'd had 3 new DJs in a long time together. It's like 3 subs coming on at once. And it was myself and Gary Davis and the lovely late Janice Long.
Do you realise how ridiculous this all is, Pat? I mean, this is all moving very quickly. A lot of people, I mean, the ultimate aim is to get onto Radio 1. You do that by chance and cover Steve Wright. Then you do a couple of weeks on Luxembourg, and then you're back again.
Yeah. And, of course, obviously, as you say, by doing what I've been doing, technically I've started at the top and just worked my way down to this podcast, and here I am.
So you go back to Radio 1. Again, the lineup was incredible, wasn't it? You were working with some true pros.
Yeah. I was working with, as you say, absolute legends who I had grown up with and who basically I was in awe of. I mean, I can remember going to the 1000th edition of Top of the Pops, because obviously I went on to host Top of the Pops because I was a Radio 1 DJ, and we all got put in one dressing room, so it wasn't like it would be today, every single Radio 1 DJ, everyone, was put in one dressing room with all those egos, and I stood there in the corner like the shy little young substitute goalkeeper who didn't know if he was going to get a match or not, just looking around thinking, well, I can either go up to Simon Bates and say, well, with this link, I want to make sure that I get my words in. And when we're standing next to Spandau Ballet, who are number one, and there's the birthday cake because True is number one, make sure I'm, in the shot. Or I can just say to him, "Hi, Simon, can I get your autograph?" so I probably went for the latter. But and it's so funny because, Simon emailed me the other day about something, and, it's like he knows me, likes me, and cares about me as a person, and I'm going, wow, this is amazing all these years on. And I speak to Tony and Kid and all these people, and I worked with Roger Scott and Kenny Everett and everybody, all these legends. So I suppose in a way, for me, it was just a really odd situation that I shouldn't really have been there. I was really sort of looking through the hole in the wall and perhaps shouldn't have been there, but it was good.
Could we talk about Kenny? Because obviously everybody who has anything to do with UK radio has a huge admiration for the legend that is Kenny Everett. I mean, what was he like to be around? What was he like to witness to work? What was he just incredible?
Yeah, he really was, and he made me some jingles, and I used to go and watch him, and he would let me watch him editing stuff with 1/4 inch and putting a bit of 1/4 inch tape over his shoulder, and then putting it back on and tying it on, and it would go backwards because he put it on the wrong way, and he would go, "Oh, that sounds marvellous. We'll keep it." And he was just an absolute, because I would sit every Saturday as a kid and try and phone in and win his contests, for his Speedy CD or whatever he was doing. It wouldn't have been a CD, it would have been a record then, and various other things that he would do. And of course, I never got through. And I ended up covering that show when I went to Capitol, and they said, "Can you sit in for Kenny this weekend?" And I went, yeah, I could sit in for Kenny, yeah, sure. He goes, "Yes, he's not coming in." And then, later on, just before he passed away, I can remember being in the FM studio, and there was only one door between the FM studio and the Capitol Gold studio. It was literally an airlock, and he would be on the same time as me on mid-mornings, and he used to come in all the time and go, "Hello." I went, "Oh, hi, Kenny, how you doing?" Like that, and I wasn't so much in awe of him by then because obviously I got to know him, and he was just a nice guy. He was quite shy and retiring compared to how you heard him on the air. A real introvert compared to his extrovert, broadcast skills. And he would come into my studio and he'd go, "Hello," and I go, "Hi, Kenny, hi, how you getting on? You good show?" And he would go, "No, it's horrible. I'm playing Freddie and the Dreamers all day. Help!" And I would say, "Oh, it can't be that bad. I mean, I'm sure they're great. I don't know many of their songs, but yeah, anyway," because I was like 25 or whatever. And he would say, he goes, "Are you playing anything new?" I went, "Yeah, I've got this new band. They're called Ace of Base. Have a listen to this." And I put on like the sign, and he goes, "This is amazing. Can you get me a copy?" So, being around these people and having those stories to be able to recount to you and having them in my memory is just amazing. Because I think if you are a young guy and you turn up, perhaps even, I suppose if you turn up at Radio 1 these days and you're a young DJ, like some of the new people they've got on, who's, I'm not too sure their names, but I heard one the other day. I had to look on the website to see who she was. Anyway, she's probably going to arrive at Radio 1 and think, wow, that's Greg James. And yeah, she's grown up with him. So yeah, it probably is relevant. But to me, it just feels that these guys were just a little more special. They were kind of rock stars of their time. They would command, you did a Radio 1 roadshow, and there wouldn't be, 5,000 people there. Wouldn't be 10, I think Blackburn told me that he once did a Radio 1 roadshow on Blackpool Beach, and there was 250,000 people there.
I'm glad you brought the roadshow up, because I wanted to ask about your experiences of being part of the roadshows.
Don't, because I never did it.
Oh, did you not?
No, I wish I had done. I was only at Radio 1 for a year. I did the Steve Wright show, and then I came back in the December, and then I got three-month contracts. And I think that was fair enough. They put me on because they wanted to see if I could gain experience, and I couldn't gain enough experience of life in general by being on once a week on a Sunday morning at 6 a.m, handing over to Tony Blackburn, because it just wasn't enough. And I didn't have enough things to say. I hadn't lived, so I didn't really know, how to be a radio presenter. And I went away to a local station and was on 5 days a week and learnt how to broadcast. So yeah, I'd never did the Radio 1 Roadshow. Would love to have done it, but I never got the chance to do it. I never had a Radio 1 pen with my name on it. I had a pen, but it was just a biro. I never had an actual Radio 1 pen, like a Bruno Brooks pen, but I did get given a Radio 1 jacket, and now there's going to be gasps from your audience. I have mentioned this before on previous podcasts, but none as important as Crunch and Roll, so here we go. I threw away my Radio 1 jacket in the dustbin.
No.
Yeah. I wish I hadn't. I don't know why. I think I was on Capitol and it was just sitting in the garage under a pile of stuff, and I thought, oh, Radio 1. Oh, I don't need Radio 1. I'm on Capitol. It's great. And who knows Radio 1? Ugh, I'll just throw it away. I threw it away. All my 275 and 285 embroidered into it and my name written in an autograph style on the front in case I forgot who I was. And I threw it away. Stephanie Hurst, I know I've mentioned her before in this, but she's a good pal of mine. Stephanie cannot believe that I threw it away. I don't think she even speaks to me anymore because of that.
I guarantee, knowing Stephanie very well as well, she's probably still searching for that jacket. She'll be going through bins.
Going through my bins.
Obviously, you mentioned Top of the Pops as well. I mean, can we talk about, I mean, I know this is all about the wireless, but what was your experience like of Top of the Pops?
Well, the first time I ever went on Top of the Pops, I got to go on with Janice and with Gary, and we were introduced as the new Radio 1 DJs wearing our jackets.
Amazing.
Yep. Can you imagine that these days? You just get pelted with bananas, wouldn't you? and I came on, and Peter Powell was hosting it, and he goes, here's the last of our new recruits, and we met Gary earlier and Janice, and this is Pat Shaw. Hi, welcome to Radio 1. Hi, Peter. Hi. Oh, sorry. Hi, Peter. And I felt like saying, all I wanted to say was, can I get your autograph? Is this a good time? And he said to me, I think he just said, hello, it's going to be great, and you're welcome, and what show are you doing, or something. And he said, any good at football? And I went, yeah, not bad. He goes, would you join the Radio 1 football team? And I said something like, if the transfer fee is right. And I think he gave me a blank look and go, here's Queen. I don't know, but I think I could have wished that I'd done it again. I think it was live, and it was fine. And I was just very nervous, a little bit stilted. And then I can remember doing Top of the Pops as a host and thinking to myself as I did the links, I am not in this shot. This camera is miles away as it pushes through the crowd and bangs these poor teenagers in the head as it goes through them and kicks them out the way. I'm thinking, why am I not in this shot? I better lean over to the left. This cameraman isn't very good. He hasn't got me in the shot. I'm nowhere near that camera. So most of my things are like stilted, and I'm bent over like this to the left or the right, or leaning forward in the hope that I'll be in the shot. I didn't realise they were quite professional and knew what they were doing at the time, so I was trying to help them with their camera angles. It was all a bit wacky, Top of the Pops, wasn't it, with the way the camera zoomed through. And they used to warn the crowd. They said, if a camera's coming, keep your eyes open because it will knock into you. So the experience of it was like, yeah, sure, you watch the countdown, you watch the countdown from the floor manager as to how many seconds you had left, and you rehearsed it, you had your links, you went through them, and then you were meant to do exactly what you'd done in the rehearsal, and by the time the link came, you sort of looked wide-eyed at the camera and thought, oh my goodness, I'm on the telly live, I'd better say something. And by the time you thought that, most of your time had gone, and you just went, here's the band.
Well, there's nothing wrong with the commission per se. The dealer does a lot of work in order to...
Well, I'm all for being open-minded, but I'm not all for discussing this live on air, thank you.
We are profoundly sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Now, let's move on to Capitol, because, this when you went to Capitol in 1987, that was when Capitol was an absolute beast, wasn't it?
Well, it was a beast in early 1987 and middle to late 1987 from the fact that it wasn't doing very well. And it became a beast after that, after I joined, but not just because of me. That was the big changeover. September 1987 is where Richard Park had arrived, or certainly maybe a month or two before, and he brought in all the new guys and girls. So he brought in Jackie Brambles, he brought in Foxy and Pete Tong and put me together with Mick and stuff like that. So there was a real, a number of other DJs started, broadcasting on the station, and he got rid of what he would call, I suppose, the old guard, and put a lot of the new ones in and started to change it. He made a new jingle package that they bought in America, and it became sort of hot rockin' and stuff, as he called it. And that was the big change. But it took a while. I mean, obviously the main thing that he started to do was he put Chris Tarrant on Breakfast, and he moved him to Breakfast, and that was not successful at the start. There were times, I think, during the start of Chris Tarrant's Breakfast regime that it was touch and go as to whether he would even stay on it.
Wow. See, nobody's ever talked about that.
Yeah. Well, especially Chris.
yeah. Do you know, you mentioned Richard Park, and there's a lot of our guests who've mentioned Parky on Crunch and Roll. And a previous guest, do we say who he is? Yeah, Jonathan Miles, who I think you know.
Yeah, I know Jonathan, yeah.
He said that we need to ask you about the red card situation, which, I mean, Parky was infamous for giving you a yellow and a red card. So yellow was like, there's your warning, red card, you're off. Did you go for a meal with Parky?
Yeah, I did. This whole red card story is actually fabled from a point of view that myself and Richard cannot remember if this was done or not. He gets asked this everywhere. I think he's really bored of it. And I can't remember either. But because everybody talks about it, I think, well, maybe it did happen. All I know is that the story, whether it's true or not, was the fact that on the last day of my last show, and I'd been there for nearly 10 years, I suppose, we went out for lunch on Christmas Eve at the end of 1996. So, 9 years. And at the end of the meal, he went to pay for the meal, and he took his card out, and then I think he saw his red in there. He had a red card in his wallet, allegedly, and he would have taken it out there and said, "Pat, man, you're off. Show me the red. You're on the bench." And I think it was just funny because I'd already knew I was leaving 3 months before, and I'd worked out my notice, so I didn't sort of disappear the same day at all. I had a very amicable relationship with Richard, and I was really grateful that he'd employed me for so long and given me the chance to be on my dream station and do everything I did there, so it was fantastic. So I don't know whether it's true or not, but if it is, if it isn't, it jolly well should be, because I was off, and that I deserved a red, so, get off the pitch.
I mean, how was Capital for you? Did you have the best 10 years of your career?
Yeah, amazing, just amazing. So much fun, and it became so big. It really was, as you say, it did become a beast. It just wasn't at the start when I joined. It was when I joined and they brought in and put Tarrant on Breakfast and did all these things. This was to make it into what it became. And Richard did create this radio station that really was the sound of London. And then, of course, we got to make the Pat and Mick records and did all that stuff with Stockache and Waterman, and it blew it way out of proportion. Probably made it more, I suppose, in a way, more known and more renowned than perhaps it even is today as a national brand. It was just huge, absolutely huge in London alone. 5 million listeners, I
mean, is it true that you performed on stage with Mick? You performed for because we know Pete Waterman, and didn't he hold, was it an arena tour or something?
Yeah,
and you were part of that, weren't you?
Yeah, there was a Stockache and Waterman night at the O2. And this is a really funny night, John, because we actually went onto this show, and I thought we were hosting it, and we did a bit of hosting, I think, and then literally, I think just before we went out the back while one of the other acts was on, like a Rick Astley or a Kylie or whatever, or a whoever, should I say, and we went out the back, and then they said to me, "Oh, right, here's your mic." And I go, "Well, I've already got a mic." They go, "No, this is your mic for singing your song." And I went, "Well, I'm not singing a song." And they go, "Yeah, you are. You're one of the acts, aren't you? You had 4 or 5 hit records. You're more than some of the other acts. So, you're singing your song." And I went, "Well, I don't even know all the words, so and don't rely on me, and I can't sing." They used a lot of magic buttons with their sound when we made the records, and I'm not really going to sing at the O2 on the stage. No, it's not for me. And they went, "Well, you are, and you're on in about 4 minutes, so get ready." And I went, "Well, you better turn this mic off. I'll just mime." And of course we went out there and did our best, and it was a medley of our hits, and it was quite bizarre. I can't dance, I can't sing. And I wouldn't hate being a pop star. It was quite funny. Going on Top of the Pops was quite funny, having hosted it, and then going on it and watching, Gary Davis then having to introduce me as an act, singing our hit record that was in the top 10. So, wow, all fun times and all good laugh. But when that's all happening, John, you don't even realise it. It's just, fly by the seat of your pants time, and you think to yourself, wow, that would be great. I'd love to have a crack at that now. I'm much more confident, much more, I'm a much better singer now. But in general, you just think I could have a crack at any of that stuff now. Like you know more about, your mortgage or your pension or whatever as you get older, because you just know more. And, you didn't know then. And being let go at Capitol and having the conversation with Richard and sort of, tears welling up in your eyes, I think if anyone, chops you out of something now, you go, brilliant, all right, well, I've had a good time, thanks very much, have a good day, I'll go take the dog for a walk. You just get on with it, don't you? Because, but at that time, when you're younger, and it means everything to you and it's the be-all and end-all, you're just more naive to everything, and you just sort of go, well, okay, that's the way it is. But it's difficult to deal with, so it's difficult to think that you were thrown into these situations, to think that, I got to go on Noel's house party almost every week and, stand with him pushing the doorbell, or go on Surprise Surprise with Scylla, and go on Celebrity Squares with Bob Monkhouse and do You Bet with Bruce Forsyth, or, Matthew Kelly, and did the opening of Euro Disney and all these things. And they just don't seem to have those kind of shows these days that are just so water cooler moments for everybody. Whereas, now people say, well, yeah, I'm watching Succession, but, I'm watching it over a period of 6 weeks and I can watch it when I want. And it's just, I was so lucky to be a part of that time, is what I'm saying, basically, where everybody kind of knew you or wanted a little piece of what you were doing, or heard you, and, you could talk about your kids and your wife and your family and stuff on the air, and people would then come up to you in a shop and say, like, oh, your son was so funny this morning when you had him on doing whatever, It's just, and because there weren't so many radio stations, there wasn't so many TV channels, there wasn't so many outlets, and then I did Funhouse for 10 years, which everybody still remembers 23 years after it finished, It's just...
Crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Did you enjoy being famous?
I don't know if I ever enjoyed it. What I did enjoy was when people were kind to you and people said hello to you and said they liked what you did. And then when people do that today, it's even nicer, yeah, and even more pleasant when someone says to you, you might be packing your bags in Tesco's or something, and someone say, oh, I really like what you do. I've followed you for many years, love what you've done, always loved you. You're just a nice guy, and thanks for doing what you do, or something. It's just like really, really amazing to get that kind of sort of, I suppose, love. And but I don't think the famous part of it is an important part of it. No, and I've never considered myself to be, as Alan would say, famous. I want to be infamous.
Any funny stories? Any funny memories from your time at Capitol?
Absolutely, John. I can remember youngster phoning up to wish Matt Goss a happy birthday on my radio show, and I didn't know it was his birthday. Bros were at the height of their fame, and all the Brossettes were really chuffed because me and Mick had been the first people to play their records, and we had broken Bros, and we were responsible for Bros, and Bros were Capitol. And she wished Matt happy birthday, and I said, that's great. I said, well, happy birthday to Matt. I said, when's Luke's birthday? And there was a bit of a gap because obviously they are twins, and I just didn't really think of that at the time. We often had kids queuing round the block to meet Vanilla Ice or Tiffany or New Kids on the Block. I actually went on tour with New Kids on the Block and took a prize winner along with Sony Music. We went to take this prize winner to Canada and got to introduce New Kids on the Block at the Sky Dome in Toronto with the roof off and everything. So that was quite cool. And, those sort of jobs, I don't know if they come about these days for DJs, but for me, it was quite a cool gig, Do
you know, obviously, because you were on Capitol, you were a big name as well, Pat, but one of our previous guests on Crunch and Roll was a program director, still is, Simon Monk is his name, and he was talking about the time his time giving away cat litter on CFM. So your career was, I mean, you obviously spent a lot of time with some big name celebs.
Absolutely. I mean, for example, standing in line at the Help a London Child lunch at the Café Royal when we're raising money for needy kids in London, and you get presented to Princess Diana, who used to sit in the office at Capitol and come in with her minder and drink coffee out of a polystyrene cup because she was a big fan of Graham Dean's Breakfast Show and used to come in and just sort of hang around.
Let's move on to Heart. So you go to Heart 106.2 in 1997. So how did that, who's in charge of Heart at that point?
Well, you forgot. You've missed a whole radio station out, John.
Oh, my Lord. See, this is where it all goes tits for me, Pat. Which one have I missed out?
You have missed out a AM station called 963 Liberty.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Don't worry. Even the owners missed it as well.
sorry, where was that then, Pat?
God, I'm not sure. It was in London. It was just after I left Capital, and they came to me and said, we'd like to pay you a vast sum of money for doing our breakfast show, which I did for about 3 months. And then I think the station said, oh, we can't afford this. And then my manager said, well, you've signed him for a year, so you might as well just not have him do the breakfast show, but just keep paying him, which they did. I think. Certainly it was a situation where I certainly got paid, I think, a lot more money than I was getting at Capital with a lot less people listening. So it was one of those opportunist moments.
Well, there we go. Okay, so let's get on to Heart.
Yeah, then I went back to a real job. There you go, with nice low fees.
So who's in charge of Heart at this time?
Chrysalis.
Right. Okay. And how did that all happen? Phone call? Can we have Pat?
Well, the old producer who used to work at Capital when I was there, who used to produce Chris Tarrant in the very early days, was Keith Pringle.
Wow.
And Keith was running Heart with Gordon, his partner, and basically we, contacted them, I think, and got a job on there, via my agents again, and I kind of did a bit of groundwork myself on it, and they thought it'd be a good idea to get me back on the air in London. So I think less than a year after I'd left Capital, I was back on the air on this station.
Do you know, a lot of people have talked about Keith Pringle. What was he like to work for?
Oh, lovely chap, always fun, always, bright and jolly, and really sort of keen to make you sound good, and was very, very good at sort of listening and telling you to, make sure you didn't just talk dry. This was quite a fast-moving station for a new station, so they wanted you to talk over ramps and stuff, and he would deliver that kind of thing. And then I went on to work for, obviously, when that moved on, and Keith, I think, had left, Francis Curry became the boss, who was a great boss, and he was brilliant because he convinced me and changed me into being a presenter rather than just a DJ. I think I went on when they were giving away a holiday, and I said, so Heart, today you can win this trip, and it will be a destination vacation station. And he went, yeah, we won't. Just say you're going to win a holiday. And I went, but I've always done that. He goes, I know, don't do it. Be a presenter. Talk to people, not at them. So he really helped me change from being a DJ, and it was fine to be a DJ on Capital. And I'm sure I was still conversational on Capital, but in general I was a DJ. I was bathed in echo, and I was being the equivalent of Z100 in London, and doing what I'd learned from all my American radio station days of listening. And he changed me into being more of a presenter and said, talk to people, not at them, and become a presenter. And that's hopefully where I've carried on doing so today, and grown up a little bit from that. So, yeah, he was great, and Heart was great for me, and I was there for 7 or 8 years, which was great.
I was going to ask if you enjoyed Heart, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it was a really good station to be on, and I took my original mid-morning show on Capital, which I left as number one. Often one does leave a radio station at the top rather than not doing well, because they take you off because they want to make sure that the radio station, I think, can continue to be number one and do really well. So they look forward, don't they? That's why a footballer might leave a club when he's doing really well to go to another club, but because they need to bring somebody younger up and get them to that stage. So for whatever reason it was, I left Capital's mid-morning show and was taken off as the number one listenership, with ratings at that time on a weekday, 10 till 1. And then I went to do the same show on Heart, and within a year I'd taken that show to number one, and it was beating Capital. Amazing. So I was number one on 2 different stations in London, very close to each other. And I'm not saying it was just down to me. It was down to the fact that Heart produced a format that people obviously liked and still like to this day, don't they?
And then you did some work at Heart in Cambridgeshire, which I've got fond memories of. I think I was doing the breakfast show on 210 FM at the time that you went there, and I was like, wow, Pat Sharp's, going to Heart in Cambridgeshire. And then also my dad lives in Cambridge as well, so when I used to visit my dad, I used to listen to you on there as well. Were you doing the show from Cambridge?
Yep. It wasn't Heart when I joined it. I decided to go and do some more radio. This was it would have been, soon after I left Heart, I suppose, I guess. I mean, for a couple of years, I don't know if I did radio. I think I was just concentrating on my gigs. I was playing so many universities. I was playing out in Ibiza and Mallorca every week and just doing loads of DJ sets everywhere. So I almost didn't have time for radio. But I missed it. So I took the job at Q103, which was Cambridge's station. Yeah. And then that became a Heart station, like many others did. And I stayed there for a while, but I did do it from their studios in Histon, working with James Keane. And James, who now runs the Tyndall stations in the Channel Islands, lovely chap. And he gave me a nice job there. And I worked doing Drive there, which was really nice. It was nice to be on in there. Did lots of gigs around the Cambridge area because of that. And used to drive in each day. It was quite fun to be able to drive somewhere rather than just have to go 10 or 12 miles. I'd always been so near everywhere, always worked in London and never really had to go very far for my shows. So that was a nice period of my life for radio. I really enjoyed it. And I think the station did pretty well, actually. Yeah, it was a good station to work for.
And then Century. I mean, I'm saying this with confidence. We keep missing out stations left, right and centre.
I forgot that. Yeah, you're right.
Was it Century next, was it?
Yeah, I think I ended up doing something on Century and then Smooth and it was Century. I shouldn't jump the gun to Smooth, should I? I think it was Century. I don't know the order of these radio stations and why everybody wanted to give me a crack. Who knew? But I was doing an evening show. I ended up doing that because that was part of Capital Radio Group at the time. So I did it from Capital, went back to Leicester Square in London and did it from there, which was always a bit difficult doing a station that wasn't on in the city where you were sitting. I found that a bit difficult. And challenging, should I say, but nevertheless, it was quite a big listenership up in the northwest, I believe.
And then Smooth. I mean, you kind of jumped over it, but Smooth is a huge station as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I started on Smooth, and it was on, in a lot of places, and in London and the Northwest. Quite often I would go to the Northwest and do shows from there, as opposed to doing them from London. Then I ended up doing my own, I think I started doing my own afternoon show, which I did from London, but a lot of the time I would have done shows previously from the Northwest, go up to Salford or... I think it was there, Salford Keys, and I would do it from there because that's where the main station was based, which of course there is still a Smooth there, isn't there, a Communicore station with Jamie Griffiths, but I was doing that with Steve Collins and started off with Steve Collins and John Simons, who gave me a shot at doing the weekend breakfast shows, and then moving on to the afternoon show, which I did for a couple of years as well.
At this point, are you still enjoying radio? Because, thinking back to that young lad who was just desperate to be a DJ, recording the jocks, in the States, over here as well. I mean, it's an amazing career you've got. But have you still got the love for it at this point? Yeah,
I absolutely do. I have the love for it from the fact that I just think I should be on the radio each day. I should be going somewhere and doing something and, practicing my craft and my art and becoming more of a communicator each day, hopefully, and less of a DJ, because I'm doing that more when I'm doing my DJ sets, which are live gigs, which have probably come on in leaps and bounds over the last 5 years, more so than ever, because of nostalgia being so popular. However, my radio shows perhaps didn't leave such an impact, to be honest with you, coming home from them each day as they did when I was at, say, the top of my game, perhaps at Capital and Heart and stuff. I didn't feel that I had... Only because there were so many more radio stations, you didn't get quite the same feedback from the amount of people who said, I heard you this morning. And I can remember, doing a show on Capital and then going, I don't know, somewhere in London to do a voiceover and walking through Covent Garden or something and hearing Capital coming out of every single stall that was selling anything. You would just hear the same station. So you'd hear the same song everywhere. So it sounded like it was piped music, but it wasn't. It was just everybody had the same radio station on. Whereas now that would be highly unlikely because given the choice and Spotify and everything else, you'd be lucky if you heard the same radio station twice in the same day.
And look, there's some more stations: Breeze, Sam, South Coast, Eagle. I've got as a question mark, and then Greatest Hits, of course, which you worked at for many years as well. Yep. There's a question I've always wanted to know: do you prefer radio or TV?
Well, I That's a tricky one. I would say I prefer radio, and I've always said that, John. Yeah, I've always said I prefer radio because I think it's more personal, it's more one-to-one, and you do generally go inside a studio, shut the door and get on with it yourself. Sometimes you have a producer who might be in there with you, somebody perhaps giving you a hand, but generally most radio presenters do their own thing, don't they? Whereas when you're doing a TV show, there's a lot of other people involved, and there's a lot of other decisions being made as to the production of the actual television show that you are part of. So I would say radio is for me more personal, and indeed my original first love. Yes, I didn't want to ever get into television. I never wanted to be the Funhouse presenter or do Top of the Pops. I wanted to be, on the radio, and that led to all those things. So yeah, the radio for me is definitely more personal. Yes.
What would you say was your biggest achievement in your radio career?
I would say playing the Radio 2 news jingle on Radio 1 on my first show. Yeah. That for me, that was a goodie, yeah. Apart from that, I suppose really just being still, I suppose it's not even an achievement. It's just the fact that people have always wanted to have me on, and I've always had nice feedback from being on, and people go, I've grown up with you now, and I loved you when you did this, and I like you when you do what you do now, and I love you on this podcast, or, and it's true, I did the Parenting Hell podcast with Rob and Josh, and I've never had such feedback from a podcast until now, of course, with this one. Yeah. So, but it was just great to do these things, and those type of podcasts, and your one, I'm sure, are in a way, they are radio, aren't they? They're going into people's ears. They're audio, and they're out there, and people can listen and hear your voice and think, do you know what? Like that guy, don't like that guy, whatever. But either way, you're out there doing it. So just being asked to be on stuff and do radio shows is great fun, and always will be for me. Just really nice to be in a studio, open a mic, and play some tunes and hopefully make people smile. So it's all an achievement for me, just being on and doing stuff.
I realised that we jumped over the couple of shows that you did at Free Radio when I met you, and
yes,
there was such excitement that Pat Sharp was walking into the building, and as I say, you walked in, you were cool, you looked still 21 years old, and you brought your own production, which we mentioned at the top, which I just love that, Pat. I love the balls of you. You're walking in, I'm Pat Sharp, and this is what I do.
Yeah, well, that doesn't always work. Some people say, lovely, well, you just wait over there and this is what we do, and you can't use your production. But that's fine. I often bring my production because I think that it just makes me sound more like me. And if I have got all the hits, I might as well play them. And I can throw in a woo, woo, and everyone's, so no harm if somebody says you can't use your production. I do a radio show in Norway based on the days of me doing Sky Channel, which we haven't mentioned, when I was a video jockey in Norway. You touched on there earlier. That's where you got the Norway thing from. I was a VJ on a channel with Tony Blackburn and Gary Davis and Peter Powell and Kid Jensen and those type of guys, all from Radio 1 at the time back in 1982, and I did it for 7 years, and I was on in 30 million homes every single day playing pop music videos on the equivalent of MTV on Sky Channel Skytrax before it became the Sky TV that we know in the UK today. So now I'm on P8 Pop, which is P8 Pop, and that show I do on a Friday afternoon across Norway. It's really popular. It's all 80s stuff, a bit of 90s thrown in, but mostly 80s. And I get to play and do it in English, not in Norwegian. Some songs are in Norwegian, but generally they're mostly English international hits. And people still message me from that today saying, wow, I used to watch you on telly when I was 13, 14 as a kid down in the den with my brothers, and it was brilliant, and now I'm hearing you on the radio and I do loads of gigs. I've just taken Snap and Katrina and the Waves to do gigs in Norway over the last couple of months, so I still do stuff out there, so I'm very lucky. I play in Oman and Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Bahrain for all the expats, and at snow bombing in Austria, and various other places abroad as well. So I'm really quite blessed that all these years on, I'm still getting a good crack at it.
So we've talked about your production quite a bit, Pat. I mean, what are your favourite? I mean, are we talking stations here? Are we your Radio 1, the production there? Because that was huge. Capital's production was incredible as well. Have you got any favourites?
Oh, I've got lots of favourite jingles, and out of my own ones, I actually had my jingle, my All the Hits jingle, which is very popular with a lot of people. And that was remastered by my friend Stephanie Hurst recently, who I sent her the 1/4-inch tape in the post, the original 1/4-inch tape. And she's kept that because I said, you can keep the original. So she's very happy with that. And she remastered it and made it sound really, really fresh and new. And even though it's been around since 1986, I think it is, certainly 86, 87, it's been around. It was made by a Norwegian band called Creation, based on a song that they had out called In My Life, and they just changed the lyrics to wow, 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 in my life, to wow, 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 Pat's got all the hits, or whatever. And I just gave them the lyrics. There's an alternative version which the geeks would love to hear that I've never played, because they didn't know, being Norwegian, whether they should sing Pat Sharp's got all the hits or all the hits. So they sang a version with the hits as well as the hits. And that is available as well, but only via Stephanie, because she's got the 1/4-inch tape.
It was a technical problem. You heard something on air you shouldn't have done.
Now, one question that I ask all my guests, Pat, is I would like to know who you would like to hear on Crunch and Roll.
Okay, so let me have a think. I would like to hear on Crunch and Roll one of my favourite broadcasters who would be really good because he does his own podcast and he works in speech radio. So therefore, he would be very, very good at talking and not messing up. And I think you'd enjoy having him on there. And that would be LBC's Nick Abbott.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Well, look, Pat, thank you so much for your time and being on Crunch and Roll. I genuinely appreciate it.
Well, thank you, John, and such a pleasure to speak with you again. And as you know, I've brought my own production, so let's get the jingles on.
Pat, have you done voiceover work? It's a stupid question.
There we go. Let me put this on so I can read it. There you go. So,
where would we have heard your voice on voiceover work?
Well, I've done a few over the years. I've had a crack. I've done your Walker's Crisps and your...
Oh, I read about that. Yeah, the Walker's Crisps one. Yeah.
But yeah, I've done a few voiceovers over the years, but I could do this one if you're ready.
Please do.
You've been listening to Crunch and Roll with me, Pat Sharp. But don't hold that against me. Subscribe on your favourite podcast app to get every new episode as soon as they drop. Crunch and Roll is a 969 media production presented by the legendary John Fox and produced by Simon Borzowski.
Oh, yeah. We were so impressed by your Kenny Everett impression, Pat. Can we also get the outro in the style of Kenny Everett as well, please? This is a Crunch and Roll first.
You've been listening to Crunch and Roll. Subscribe on your favourite podcast. It's not working very well. I don't know why. It's just that I can't imagine he would say those words because, it doesn't work. It doesn't. Kenny's words are like, "Hello, are you playing anything modern?" That's Kenny, but I can't go subscribe.